Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 6, Favorite Stage Experiences. Melissa and I are going to be talking all about the stage experiences that we've loved the most and that have shaped us the most, and we hope you enjoy. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Downstage Right, Theater Finds Its Voice. I'm your host, Simmon and Fecho.
I'm your co-host, Melissa Statema.
And today we're going to dish on all of our favorite stage experiences. And we're going to talk about everything involved in those experiences, from audition, rehearsal, performance, and then what those experiences have meant to us as we look back on them. We're each going to pick 2 shows, only 2, which is hard. That's
extremely hard.
Yeah, tough to narrow it down. But we're going to pick 2 shows that really stand out to us and discuss a wide range of details about the ones that we've picked, and then talk about the impact that those shows have had on us. So we're going to kind of just dive right in.
So my 2 shows that I picked, and I'm going to be a little weird. I picked my time at Sight and Sound Theaters. I was there for a year contract, and I did 3 shows during that time, but I was in the ensemble for all of those shows. So I'm kind of combining my experience there. Sight and Sound Theaters are in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It is a professional theater. You do about 13 shows a week. I was 19 when I started there and 20 years old when I left. That was around 2000, 2001. They're a 2,000-seat theater, and they put on these massive musical productions that bring Bible stories to life. And it's a huge 300-foot stage that's a panoramic stage. It goes all the way around the theater. My other show is Proof. I did that this year in 2020. I played the role of Claire with Theater Statesville. I hate saying this, but I was 39 years old when I did the show. It is by David Auburn, and it was a Pulitzer Prize winning show. And if you don't know, Proof is the story of a young woman, Catherine, her sister, their brilliant father, an unexpected suitor, and they're all pieces of the puzzle in search of the truth behind a mysterious mathematical proof, and it's a drama. So those are the shows that I picked, and I picked them. It was really hard. Like you said, I've had wonderful theater experiences. I really didn't have any that were terrible. There were 2 that were maybe a little meh.
I've had some that are terrible.
I'm so sorry. But I tried picking the ones that left the biggest imprint on my life. So for Sight and Sound, I chose that one because it was my first professional theater gig. I was a teenager. It was this huge deal at the time. And more importantly, it is where I met my now husband. So that is one of the reasons that show, or being there for that year, has become one of my favorite experiences. And for Proof, out of all my theater experiences, it was probably the best overall experience. Most professional, least stressful, no drama. It was really lovely, lovely experiences. And it reminded me how much I love acting. It brought that back because I've been doing so much behind the scenes. It brought back my love of acting again.
Well, those are great choices, and can't wait to hear more about them. You were fantastic in Proof, I can attest, because I saw it. And Sight and Sound, for anybody who doesn't know, definitely look it up. They do some really crazy stuff. They have animals on stage,
which I will be talking about in a little bit.
I'm sorry.
No, I have a story. So I'm glad you brought it up. Yeah, you're right. They have tons of live animals. They do have animatronic ones too, but a lot of real animals.
Yes. Well, I'm glad I didn't scoop you.
No, not at all.
So for my 2 shows, I selected Urinetown, which is a musical that I did at Genesius Theater in Reading, Pennsylvania. It was an amateur production. I was 19. I played Little Becky Two Shoes. It is not an original piece. It was done on Broadway before we did it. So it was a really, really great experience. Excited to dig into that one. My other favorite experience, also at Genesius Theater in Reading, Pennsylvania, was Sideshow. We did the 2014 revival version of Sideshow, and I was 31 when I was in that, and I played Daisy Hilton. And I picked those two shows because they were incredibly formative for me, which I feel was really important. When we did Urinetown, it was a very instructive experience. It was a very fun experience. I was going through a tough time. I wasn't sure if I was going to go back to college. I took a semester off, and it was during a period of self-discovery. And then it was just this like really great, joyous coming together of this ensemble piece. And it really lightened my spirit and made me feel just great about a lot of things, and rejuvenated me in a lot of ways. And then Sideshow was very important in terms of me finding my voice as an actor and me gaining certain levels of confidence in my abilities. And so I'm really excited to talk more about that as we go.
I have never seen Sideshow, but I have seen Urinetown, and I was not thinking I was going to like that show just based on the title and kind of hearing a little bit about what it was about. But after I watched the entire musical, I was in love. Like, that's an incredible show.
Yes, it's so great, and it's so funny. Even in the show, they talk about how terrible the title is.
It's misleading. I mean, it's not, but it is.
It confuses people, and it feels... It either really intrigues you and you're like, okay, I gotta know what that's about. Or you're like, ugh, what?
Do I really want to see a show about urine?
Yeah. And it's so fantastic.
It really is. But I also want to see Sideshow. I've heard about it. I know some people who have been in it. They weren't in it in a place where I could see it, unfortunately, and I hope someone in this area does it soon.
That would be...
So we can go.
That would be awesome. I would love to either be in it or see it or anything. It's fantastic. And just to give you guys a little bit of background, if you don't know, so Urinetown is about a government putting restrictions on how often you can use the bathroom. Because
terrible. That causes me anxiety.
Yeah, because of a need for water conservation. So not that description would suggest it, but it's actually very funny. And so it's funny, it's exuberant, but it's also makes you think a lot, and it sort of has a level of political vibe to it. Sideshow is a show about two girls, Daisy and Violet Hilton, who were conjoined twins. And it's basically about their lives. They were real people, and how they navigated the world of being, with being very different from everyone that they came across and coming from really challenging upbringing. So it's a really interesting show, and it was so great to do it. So I'm excited to talk more about it.
I realized I didn't share what actual shows I was in at Sight and Sound. The 3 shows were Miracle of Christmas. I feel like their titles kind of give away what they're about. It's about the story of Christmas, Jesus, and then Behold the Lamb, Easter show, and Noah, which is about Noah.
So first we're going to talk a little bit about the audition process. So at Sight and Sound, how did you find out about that audition, and why did you end up auditioning?
So at the time, I was working as a dancer at Disney full-time, and I'd been there about a year and decided it was time for a change. What I didn't know was that these auditions were going to be coming up for Sight and Sound. I didn't even know about the theater, but I was at Blizzard Beach with my mom, and my aunt and uncle joined us. And while we were in line for a ride, they told us about this incredible theater they'd found out about. I believe at that time my uncle had even auditioned, and they told us auditions were coming up and just made it sound incredibly wonderful. And my mom said, let's go. And I was completely thrilled that she said yes. We didn't have a lot of money at the time, so I was shocked my mom said yes, but she's always been my biggest fan. She's been at every show. She's been there sacrificing along the way so I could have dance lessons and voice lessons and all the things my whole life. So when she said yes, I didn't argue with her about it at all. And we did some research and we got plane tickets and even tickets to see the show while we were there. And it was really, really wonderful and also intimidating seeing the show that you're auditioning for the day before an audition. But that's how I heard about the audition and why I auditioned. I was ready for a change and ready to expand my theater horizons, I guess.
That's awesome. So what was the actual audition like?
So Sight and Sound is a massive theater. It's probably the biggest theater I've ever seen. So in their lobby, which is huge, they had all these chairs lined up and, everyone just kind of sat in the chairs waiting to be called. But the first thing they did is they brought everyone onto the stage for a dance audition, which I love dance auditions. I mean, I still get nervous sometimes, but out of all the different kinds of auditions, it's my least nerve-wracking. And with it being a Bible theater or they're telling biblical stories, there wasn't a lot of hard dancing and it wasn't a dance show, just mostly movement. So I had a really good time with that and it was mostly focusing on the performance. So I had a lot of fun with that. However, after that, you got brought in one at a time and you had to sing 2 songs. Mind you, this is a 2,000 seat theater and you're on this 300-foot stage alone. You can't even really see the director. I couldn't tell you how many people were out there. You could kind of hear voices from afar in the dark. And it was one of the scariest moments of my life. I had completely prepared for it, but singing auditions make me more nervous than just about anything. I always kick myself because I feel like I never do them the way that I've practiced. My throat closes up. I'm shaking uncontrollably. If there's a harder note that you have to sing, there's just the shaky sound, all the
all the
oh my
nerves.
gosh, I'm getting anxious just thinking about it. So I got through that, and then they brought you in one at a time again in a small little room, and you had a one-on-one interview, kind of about your personal stuff. They asked a lot of different questions. And then I went back to Florida and waited a few weeks and got the phone call that I made it into the show, which was extremely exciting. My poor mom, though, was so sad. She was excited, but she was losing her baby for the first time. And I packed up my stuff and I went on a train with my mom and we went to Pennsylvania and I, moved away for the first time. And
oh my gosh.
It was hard and wonderful and exhilarating and all those things.
So for Proof, was that a different type of audition experience?
It was much more relaxed, a lot less people. So we had auditions at a church and we got to sit in this little space with everyone who was auditioning, and we were all given, when we walked in, the different scenes we were going to be reading for. Actually, Simmon and Joey were there with me, and we got to rehearse with each other, and it was really laid back. Everyone was kind. You could tell people were nervous, but it was a good feeling at an audition. Sometimes you go and people are kind of snooty because,
standoffish.
Yeah, and it wasn't like that. Everyone was talking and working together. And, they brought us in groups and we got to read various scenes. And I love that they gave us more than one chance to read, because I feel like anytime you audition the first time, you're always a little bit more nervous. I love getting called and being asked to do more so that you can be a little bit more relaxed and have more fun with it. And they just did cold readings, which I kind of like cold readings.
Yeah.
Yes, I always feel silly because you're holding the paper and it's a dead giveaway that I'm nervous because the paper's rattling. But after the first time, my hands kind of calmed down a bit and I'm better. So it was a really good audition experience. I hate having to audition against my friends.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of rooting for my friends, so it's weird at an audition when you're wanting a role and there's only, especially when there's only 2 roles for women and 2 roles for men, and you're literally fighting it out.
Somebody's gonna lose.
Exactly. And I hate that because I'm my friend's biggest, I want to be the biggest fan for everybody, but I'm but I wanted to. It's just this horrible thing.
We wanted to be the biggest fans for you, so we were happy for you.
Thank you so much. It was a fun show to be a part of.
So I know you got the role of Claire. Was that the role that you wanted, or were you looking at Catherine? Or
no? much too old for Catherine. I'm definitely more of a Claire, even in my real life. I wouldn't say her and I would do the exact same things. There's a lot of decisions that character made that I would never do.
Yeah.
But I more relate in that, she's the older sister and the caregiver, and her intentions are really good. Like, she just wants to care for everybody,
Yep.
even though she may go about it in a not so healthy or proper way. So no, the role I went for was the role that I got. And being older, I'm about almost 10 years older than the role. I knew this was my final shot getting to do this show. But one interesting thing, besides like connecting kind of as the sisterly role, my husband, who was the director, we had also a familiar connection to the show as well, in that Lauren's brother was a math genius who suffered from mental illness, and he passed away a few years ago. And my husband's mom had Alzheimer's for 20 years. And unfortunately, during the rehearsal process, she passed away. And so it brought this whole new, feeling to the show and to the rehearsal. And it just gave it a stronger meaning for him, but also for me, and knowing that even though this wasn't the same exact story that he went through and that we went through as a family, but that there was a connection.
It's always nice when you can bring a more personal, emotional connection, especially through directing, because sometimes you're directing something that you maybe isn't your favorite. And so it's really extra special when you get to direct something that just really speaks to your soul.
Well, and doing theater as a side thing, not as your job, you thankfully can be a little bit more particular in what you're choosing. For me, because it does take up so much extra time outside of real life, I don't want to ever pick anything to audition for or choreograph for or direct that I'm not super passionate about. So that is a positive of doing community theater. You get to pick and choose what you do instead of working professionally, where sometimes you're asked or told,
this is what you got.
Yep, you got to do this. So Simmon, for your show, for Urinetown, how were the audition experiences for both of your favorite shows, similar or different?
So for Urinetown, I was trying to think and remember back to the audition. I can't remember it specifically. I know that I did audition in some fashion. I sang something, I read something. My dad was directing the show. Like I said, I was going through a really hard time. Like I said, I took a semester off college. I went to a school in New York City, and my whole life, I had spent my entire life being like, one day I will graduate from high school and I will move to New York City and my life will be perfect. And that was not a great mindset, because nothing is perfect and life doesn't work that way. As one of my favorite actors says in one of my favorite shows, life doesn't make narrative sense. So
that is true.
Yeah. So there was no, pot of gold at the end of that rainbow. And when I got to New York, it was hard. It was a lot harder than I thought it would be. And I didn't like it as much as I thought I would. It was a challenging place. Even in a more protective college setting, it was tough. And plus, at that age, there's just a lot of changes happening and a lot of new things. And even though I was like very, very familiar with the city, I'd been in the city a lot growing up, but it was just living there was different. And I really struggled that whole first year. I had a breakup with a boyfriend, and there was a bunch of stuff that happened,
all piling on top of itself.
Yeah, and so that summer I had to make some hard decisions, and I was just like, I don't know that I'm ready to go back. I don't know if that's what I want. And so I decided to take a semester off, and then I was applying to other schools locally near my home. So that I could live at home and go. I almost went to Kutztown University because I was just like, I just have no clue what direction I want to go, and I shouldn't be spending all this money and living in this expensive city and whatnot. So I ended up, through this experience of doing Urinetown, actually made me feel like I really have to go back to New York, and I really have to give it more of a chance. And I will be upset with myself if I don't. I know, like, years down the line, I'll look back and be like, why didn't I just push myself a little bit harder to see how it goes? Not to say that there isn't something for knowing when you're licked and just
Yeah.
taking it. But for me, I thought I have unfinished business there and I need to go and go back. So Urinetown was so important in that process. But I was just in a fog. I was just kind of lost. And my dad was directing Urinetown and he was like, come audition and be in it. It'll be great. And I was like, okay, sure.
Whatever, Dad.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of was like, okay. And, you know, he knew what I was capable of doing, but I just came in and I sang and I read something. And then it was like, boom, you're in the show. And he was like, I really think you would be, you know, great in this particular kind of show. And it might make you feel a little happier. And, you know, so I was like, okay. So I feel like I just kind of floated and dropped into this great experience. So like I said, I don't really remember the audition in the way that I do for Sideshow, but it was, it was so important. I'm so glad that my dad kind of nudged me and forced me into it.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of, was there a specific role you wanted?
So I wasn't like dying to have any specific role, but there was this role, Little Becky Two Shoes, which I ended up playing, which I knew was very comedic. And I always felt very comfortable with comedy and very confident in myself and my abilities with comedy. So I really felt like that was a good role for me. And so I got that part, which was great. And my dad has very specific things that he's looking for when it comes to comedy, and he likes to do, especially in a show like this, the comedy it has to be right on, and he really wants to pinpoint exactly what he wants for the comedy. And so I had a lot of experience working with him and watching him direct comedy, and so I tend to have like a good just like sense of what he's going for, and he doesn't have to work with me as much to bring it out. So it kind of ended up working out really well. And Little Becky Two Shoes is just a hilarious, amazing role.
I love the name.
I know, right? It's so funny.
So for Sideshow, did you know anything about the show when you auditioned?
It's interesting because I knew the show. I'd heard of the show. I knew of some elements of the 1997, which was the original, I think it was 1997. And a friend of mine who was directing this version that I ended up being in, Chris, he loves the show. It was a passion project for him. And he saw the show, the original Broadway cast. He saw the revival cast. He was dying to do the show. And I knew I Will Never Leave You, which is a popular song from the show. But other than that, I really didn't know too much of the music or too much about it other than it's conjoined twins. That was pretty much it. And my friend, Dara, who's one of my best friends, she was thinking about auditioning for Violet, which is the other conjoined twin. And she said, you know, would you think about auditioning for Daisy? That would be so cool if we could play these parts together. And I was like, maybe. I was like, I don't know if I can even do it. I would have to listen to it. And so I started listening to the show a bunch. This was like a year before the audition. And I kind of became obsessed with it. I was just listening to it nonstop. And I was like, this is something I think I really want to do, and learning a lot about the show and learning a lot about the girls and their true story of things that happened in their lives. And so by the time the audition actually came around, I was like so built up that I was like, I really want this. But it was so interesting because until I thought about auditioning, I really didn't have any desire to do it or know really anything about it. And then it became so important to me to be able to do it. So it was a really great learning experience. And I, for one, love things like that. I love finding shows that I don't know and just going head first and like getting obsessed with it and really, really sinking my teeth in. I think that's fun. So,
well, what was the audition experience like for this particular show?
It was interesting because so we had to audition individually as well, but Dara and I were interested in also auditioning together. So they allowed us to sing together.
Oh, that's nice.
And so but we didn't know if they were gonna allow us to sing together, if they were gonna make us only sing separately. And it's, harmony and stuff. And we had to prepare 2 songs, the 2 big songs in the show, Who Will Love Me As I Am and I Will Never Leave You.
So for your initial audition, you had to come prepared with songs from the actual show?
Yes.
Okay.
Which is different.
Yes, that is very different from most auditions. Usually you're told, do not come with a song from the show. So this is really interesting.
Yeah, their approach there, and it is, again, it's an amateur, it's a community theater setting. They tend to take the approach of, we'd rather hear someone sing the actual material.
Yeah. Well, especially with this show, when I'm guessing your harmonies are constant.
There's a lot. Yeah. There's a lot of harmonies. And that was one of the things I was a little anxious about, because I can sing harmony. I've been in a lot of choirs, etc., but there's a totally different thing when it's you and one other person, and you have to be harmonizing.
There's no one else to listen to make sure you're singing properly or the right notes.
Yes. And I was terrified, but I was catching a lot of the harmonies just from listening to the cast recording.
Oh, that's good.
So I felt more confident about it. But yeah, they had us sing songs from the show, which was, I thought, great, because it helped us really kind of feel out characters and stuff. But so we practiced a lot together, and we practiced a lot separately, because that's the other piece of the show, and something I'll talk a lot about here, is that one of the biggest challenges in the show is in the show they talk about we're one though we're two, and that's exactly what it is. It's, you're basically one person, but you're not one person. So it's about finding this connectivity and this common thread, and making your voices fit together in a way that makes it almost like one voice, but then also having these varied voices and these varied approaches that also show how different your characters are. So it's just this crazy type of process to figure that out. And in the beginning, when Dara and I started working together, Dara is a soprano. She has a very different style voice than me, so her challenge was working on her belt a little bit more and finding that, and my challenge was softening sort of my pop tendencies and downplaying my overly beltiness at times, and kind of finding a soft center that we could both live in. And then also working on it on my own and trying to do it without somebody, and trying to make it sound good enough as an individual that it doesn't sound like, well, that's boring, I don't want to pair that with somebody else, or that's too much, she can't be paired with someone else because she'll try to overdo them type thing. So it was a really interesting balance. And when we got in there and they said, you can sing separately and then you can sing together, that was a really great thing. And I gotta say, I have never had a better audition. It was the best audition I've ever had. I was terrified, but the minute we opened our mouths, there was just a vibe. There was just, and the people at the table, there was a bunch of people, because they were doing season auditions. And so it was multiple shows. And so there was multiple production teams at the table. And just, I remember looks on their faces just being so engaged. And it, again, not to say that it was perfect, but it was as close to perfect as an audition could go. And it was just a really magical experience. And I remember coming out of the room and being like, even if I don't get it or we don't get it, what a way to go. I mean, that audition is going to live in my heart forever.
Well, and for those of you who may not audition regularly or at all, usually when you leave an audition, you don't always feel like you've done amazing. I know most people probably leave auditions I could have done better. So for Simmon to feel this incredible feeling afterwards is huge, because that doesn't usually happen.
Yeah, that was the one and only time
I've
ever felt that
Hold
way.
on to that.
Yeah,
Hold on to it forever.
I do. I store it up for use later, breadcrumbs.
Yes.
dig a little bit into the rehearsal process for these shows. So, Melissa, talk a little bit about what the rehearsal process was like at Sight and Sound.
At Sight and Sound, it was a really odd rehearsal process. It was something I'd never seen before with a show. So you were handed an index card of sorts, and there was a grid on the stage, and there was basically a map for every actor so you knew exactly where you were going for the entire show. And you had to stay exactly where your numbers lined up. So there was really no room for creativity as an actor, at least as far as I could tell with ensemble. I mean, you could create your own characters, but you weren't allowed to move about at all. You couldn't collaborate with the director. Even the leads had specific ways that they had to hold their arms. So like during a song that they were singing on this exact word, whatever that word was, they had to hold their arm at a certain way and tilt their head just right. I'd never seen a process like this before. Now, I get it. They do their shows on repeat. So like Miracle at Christmas happens every Christmas time. And it's a cast of about 45 to 50. So there's a lot of people, and you have to put these shows up really fast. So I get it. You know, you want it to look the same. You want the consistency. But I missed creating something new. And the writer of the show, and he was also the creator of the theater itself, he was a painter. So he wanted every image, if you were to freeze the show at any moment, to look like a painting on a wall. So I think that's one of the reasons they were very, I don't want to say controlling about it, but everything had to be very, very, very specific. So it looked like this beautiful piece of art at any moment of time during the show.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was really, really different. I've never experienced that since. I'm not going to say I loved it, but it was unique, and I know it's just something that that worked for them. And this was 20 years ago, so I think things have definitely changed over the years. They have new writers. They have just obviously all new people over 20 years. So, and I do still have some friends who work there, and I think things are quite a bit different, but I'm not sure how the rehearsal process is currently. So it was unique. I'm kind of glad I got to experience that, but I don't know that I would like to have a rehearsal process and that, done in that way again. Yeah, it was
I think
bizarre.
Also the numbering, I forget what that's called. There's it's a particular approach, but a couple of community theaters in the area I grew up used the numbering system, but there was still more flexibility. You weren't just like handed a card and so that's interesting.
It was so weird. Yeah. So it would say for this song, you're at, I don't even remember. It's been so long.
B2.
Yeah.
2.
Now I get it. Also, it's not only just the front stage, but they're huge side stages. So to manage all of that would be impossible. But it was, I didn't love it.
It sounds like it would feel more like you're being plugged in.
Yep. Yeah.
To a
absolutely. And I'm not saying anything bad. It's just different. It's just not my preference for a rehearsal process.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So during the rehearsal process, did you develop any relationships? I know you mentioned earlier that you met some really great people. So did that happen through the process?
Yeah, so day one, the first day I started working, they did not just throw us into rehearsals. We had a get to know you day. Before we started working, we were supposed to read this whole packet. So they had, a fun trivia game and all this get to know you stuff. And day one is when I met my husband. So hands down, the best thing to come out of that experience was meeting him. But we didn't start dating until I was leaving. So that first year we just became best friends, which looking back, I'm so thankful that we were best friends first. We pretty much did everything together. Like I said, we didn't start dating till I was about to leave. And not only did I meet him, but I met this other group of people who were also new. And most of them, it was their first time being on their own, just like me. So we bonded really, really quickly. And I still have a lot of friends from there that I stay connected to thanks to Facebook. And I have some friends who worked there then who still work there now. So they've been working there for 20, 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah. There's a good chunk of people who have just made it their career working there. And some who were in the shows then are writing the shows and directing the shows. So they've been able to advance and do some more creative stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Really cool. And so for Proof, was the rehearsal process different? What was that like?
Very different. Hands down, my favorite rehearsal process I've ever been a part of. Lauren was the first and only director I've ever worked with so we had a read-through. For those of you who don't do theater, a read-through, you start a rehearsal process usually by sitting down and just reading the show. You're sitting at a table. So we did that 2 weeks before we started rehearsals. So we got our scripts. And the one thing he did is he handed out these blank packets. I think it was at least 10 pages of character questions. He didn't say we had to fill out all of them. He just encouraged us to do some character work while we were memorizing our lines. And I loved that because I'm big on character work anyway. I do that on my own. So to have a director, hand that out and to do that was really, really neat for me. And just knowing that he wanted to invest in the character development as much as I did.
That's awesome.
During that downtime, I started memorizing my lines, but I also got together with Katie Gordon, who played my sister, and we got together and we came up with this whole backstory for our characters, stuff the audience would never know, but, who was our mom? How did she pass away? All these really great things so that the day we started our rehearsals, we were ready to go.
Helped enrich the experience.
Yes, absolutely.
So did you feel like that was the element of the process that made you feel like you were becoming a better actor, or was there other parts to it?
So the other neat thing Lauren did when we first started out, he said, okay, just kind of go on stage and let's see how would your characters move? Where would they go? And Laura, our incredible stage manager, took down some notes, and then we went back through it and said, this isn't really working out, but I really liked what you did with your character there. Let's keep that. So it was organic, but also planned. It was a good mix of not just like this dictatorship or, woohoo, I have no idea what I'm doing, just figure it out on your own. It was really nice. It was a really good collaboration between the director and the actor. He really listened to us. There were some times where he would give us, do this. And it felt weird to me as a person and as an actor. Mm-hmm. And I would, this feels a little weird. What if we try this? Yeah. And he would say, well, let's try it. Oh, yeah, I like that better. Let's keep that. It was really helpful to have an investment in what your movement was, too, especially when working in a small space. It made that a little less tricky.
And for anyone who doesn't know, proof takes place on a porch.
That's it.
That's all you got.
So just getting to know your character, saying your lines for the sake of saying lines, that's kind of what happens if you don't do that homework ahead of time. So it really did help. But one of my favorite parts about this rehearsal process was every single person in the show worked equally as hard and was extremely professional during the entire rehearsal process. For me, like I said, it was the best rehearsal process I've been a part of. You'll be a part of a show where there's a handful of people who really care, and then there'll be a handful of people who are just there to goof around, get another show on their resume, and this was not the case for this cast. And something like we would have rehearsals canceled because of weather. This was during winter, so snow or whatever, but we would still, my house ended up becoming the meeting place, so we would get together, and even when we didn't have rehearsals, we would get together and run those lines. So 4 people in a 2-hour show equals everyone has a crap ton of lines.
Yes.
And so, and with it being a Pulitzer Prize winner, the words are important, and you don't want to change the words unless you absolutely have to. So we wanted to make sure and drill into us that we were getting those rhythms and those words and not skip important parts, because if you skipped a section, it could throw off the rest of the show, because proof also goes back in time. It's present day, and then it goes back to different time periods in their lives. So
with a play too, I feel like when you have that many lines, you really want them so committed to memory.
Yes.
That they are just locked, so that you can start to play. Because if you're too worried about what you're supposed to be saying, you're never going to get to the emotion of it.
Yeah. And it's easy to get distracted, so it's got to be that, it's just second nature. Yeah. Second nature. And so that was an incredible rehearsal process, and I really owe it to Lauren and the cast and Laura, and even Grace was the props master. Like, she had all our props from like pretty much day one. Like, she started collecting the props months before the rehearsals even started. So we had our props for the most part right from the beginning.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So it was a great rehearsal process. I would go and definitely do that rehearsal process again in a heartbeat.
Cool.
All right, so Simmon, for Urinetown, what was the process of putting the show together like for you?
It was a little different than I'm used to because my dad asked me to be the choreographer. So
what?
I know.
I did not know this.
Yeah, so I've choreographed a couple shows, but I always joke because one time I was helping choreograph a moment in this one show, and I always joke that I'm not a choreographer, I'm a movement specialist.
I love that.
Because the truth is I have no real solid dance background. I've taken dance classes, but I'm not like a dancer, and I really know nothing about dance.
How did I not know you've choreographed shows before?
I don't brag about it. It's not my strong suit.
What?
But
this is fascinating.
I have a directorial eye, and I sort of tend to. Please pardon me. I'm in no way comparing myself to Jerome Robbins, but Jerome Robbins is one of my favorites, and what I love about his work is that he really pioneered this idea of sort of a blending of staging and choreography and really making them seamless, and it not being like, well, this is the staging and this is the dancing. And so again, I am not a Jerome Robbins level choreographer, but I like that mentality, and I am a director sort of in my core, and so I like to play with the visual images and stuff like that. So he asked me to do it, and in Urinetown, there's like one big dance number, and the rest are just kind of like, again, staging. Yeah, it's mostly just staging. And so I felt like I could do it, and that it would be something that I could handle, and it would be a fun way to try something new. And so it was an interesting rehearsal process because I was in the show and I had my own part, and then I was also teaching quote unquote choreography to people. And actually there's this very funny moment that happened where I wasn't used to choreographing or I hadn't even directed at that point. So trying to manage all of these people who sometimes would act like children and talk way too much and not be quiet and not listen and not, whatever. So at one point we had these off of the stage. So the stage was kind of lifted, and then we had these ramps on either side of the stage. And I was trying to teach something and everyone was talking and I was getting really frustrated. And so it got to a boiling point and I yelled. But as I was yelling, I'm walking down this ramp and I flipped.
No.
I completely just tripped and fell and flipped over. And I was like, well, that's what I get for yelling.
Your punishment.
And it was hilarious. And to this day, it will always remain in my memory as like, just the way the universe keeps you in check.
Oh, yes.
Sometimes. And again, I was 19, so I was really it was just the stress of the whole thing and being terrified.
That's a lot to put on yourself at 19.
So, yeah, it was just different because I was trying to balance both of those things.
What did you take away from this rehearsal process that will help you as a director down the road?
A lot of things. My dad is a really fantastic director. He really has a great vision for things, and he can be challenging to be directed by him, but he makes it worth it. He really brings out really amazing things in the people that he works with. Lots of growth happens, and the end result is really fantastic. And he, like I said, he knows how to bring a vision to life. And that's kind of a rare thing. Not everybody knows how to do that. And so I think watching him do that was really great. Also, the show at the time was known, but it wasn't, it's not Grease. Like, not everybody knows it. And even among the theater community, there were some people who, had heard of it, but didn't really know anything about it. So trying to work with us, but then also trying to build this excitement around the show so that we had an audience and that it would be a good experience from that perspective. There was also a lot of really, really talented people in the show in general. Just ensemble. I mean, it's an ensemble show anyway. the ensemble was on stage a lot. And even though I had a small role, I was also on stage a ton as other background characters. And so when you work with just a bunch of really, really awesome people who are fun to be around, but also really talented, it was just really fun and inspiring. We also had someone in the show who played the piano, and he played the piano on stage a lot. And, we, in the show, they kind of integrate the piano player into the show anyway, so it was already kind of there, but that was a fun element of it. And it was really cool to work with so many multi-talented people and bring something together where you felt like everyone was really holding up their end of things.
That's always nice and refreshing.
Yes.
So for Sideshow, what relationships did you develop during the process, if any?
Many. So many. Not if any, many. So Dara, who's one of my best friends from back home, I miss her so much. Hey, Dara. We got really close. We did Hairspray together and got really close around that time. And then so Sideshow was like maybe 2 years later. Mm-hmm. And so we were already very close. But then through the process of having to literally do the show attached to each other.
Oh my gosh.
So it was so crazy because people would always ask, once they saw it, like, well, what was keeping you together? Nothing. We played with magnets. We played with different things for different reasons. They weren't working. And we were honestly just like, it's honestly easier for us to just keep ourselves together, and it'll stop us from having issues with costume changes.
Oh, yeah.
If all we have to do is,
You're not like Velcroed on the outside.
Yes, exactly. And so there's not this like rip noise or something. So, yeah, I mean, that was all us. And so having to literally be hip to hip and, again, like I was saying before, sort of find this interesting place of we are one, but we're very different.
Yeah.
And balance that out was really challenging.
I feel like it puts you in a kind of vulnerable place being that close to someone.
Yeah.
For an extended period of time. Like normally you're not literally connected at the hip to somebody else while you're performing and singing. And whew.
And Daisy as a character is very confident, very brash, very like, I'm here. And Violet is like a very shy character. And I would say that for me, until I'm really confident about something and feeling really good about it, I struggle to be like, hey, look at me. Like, I really have to get it down. And so I felt like Dara was a lot more confident throughout the rehearsal process. And I'm sure she would have a different perspective. But I felt like I was a lot more hesitant and scared throughout the process and feeling like I was missing the mark in some way. And so it took me a while until like closer to the end of the process, feeling like I had pulled everything together in a way that felt good to me. And then I was finally able to really embrace more of Daisy's true personality and really bring that out and not be as afraid of it.
Well, sometimes with roles, it does take the whole rehearsal process, and that's why we have those. So it's good that it came out towards the end.
Yes.
And that you found that within you. And I wish I could have seen you in this show.
Well, and Dara was such a great partner for that. I mean, not just because she's a very close friend of mine, but she was good at learning her pieces, working together with me if I needed additional help, talking through issues. She was just really, really, I wouldn't have wanted, I've always said this, I wouldn't have wanted to be attached at the hip with anybody else. She was just, it was perfect. And we had no clue if we were going to get cast together. We ended up in a group of like 6 girls who were part of like the final round of auditions, and we didn't know if only one of us was going to get picked or none of us were going to, be selected. So for us to get to do it and do it together was just crazy. And so I think it just further solidified our bond doing that show. And then also Joey played opposite me. So my fiance, my now fiance, who was not my fiance at the time, we were in a very different situation at the time, both of us, but there was a connection that really came to the surface in that process and developed over time, and so thankful to that experience for exposing that to us. And it wasn't always an easy road, but we're so thankful and lucky to be where we are and to have each other. And
Aww.
so, yeah.
I love that we both met our significant others doing theater, and I can't wait to talk about it with you and with them on a future episode coming up.
Teaser.
So how did this rehearsal process help you become a better actor?
It helped me in a lot of ways. It was the first musical I had done that was very serious. Like, there are fun moments on the show, but it's mostly a drama in musical form. And I had been in dramas that were plays, but I had never been in a musical drama. And quite honestly, that genre is just doesn't tend to be my favorite. I tend to be more of a musical comedy person. That's just sort of the types of shows I was raised around, and I like a lot of different shows. It's just not where my full heart lives. So being that it was a musical drama, it was a totally new area for me. And it was something that I had to do a lot of character work. I had to really pull this character out of me in a way that I didn't think I was going to have to work as hard at being this character. I felt like I was feeling more shy than I normally would, but I will say this. So the part itself, it was something I wasn't sure that people were going to accept me in this type of role.
Oh.
It's not the type of role I've ever played before. It is truly a singer's type of role. It's a lot of singing, and I am first and foremost an actor who can sing, who then can sort of dance if she tries.
She can dance. She's fine. Don't listen to her.
But I'm definitely, acting is the number one. Mm-hmm. So I never think of myself as a singer. I am a person who can sing, but I have to work really hard at it. Joey, my fiance, he is an amazing singer. He doesn't mean he doesn't work hard at it. He sure does. But
it just comes a little bit easier,
more natural. That's probably his number one.
Yeah, his top thing.
And so for me, it's just not. And so I was really hard on myself and was really I need to get vocally, I need to be on it. I need to get this exactly right. And it wasn't just for other people, it was for me too. I wanted to prove it to myself that I could sing in this way, that I could have a role that was a lot of singing and be successful at it and show how really great I could be in that part. And so a lot of it was in the rehearsal process was proving it to myself that I had the skills. There was also one song called Private Conversation, which was a song between Joey and I, our characters. Mm-hmm. And it was a really hard song because the song was a lot more soprano-y, and I am I'm a mezzo-soprano belter. Yeah. I wouldn't even really call myself a full-on mezzo-soprano. I can sing higher notes.
It's not where you're comfortable.
Yes, I tend to be more comfortable in a belty type of zone. But this song was not a belty song. This was an emotional song. And I was terrified.
Oh, my gosh.
And of course, Joey, hit that ball way out of the park. Oh, my God. You should hear him sing this song.
He walked in, did it, walked out.
Oh, my gosh.
No issues.
It was insane. Ugh. And I was just okay.
How do you do it?
At some point, I'm going to sing notes somewhere in there, and maybe people will pretend that they didn't hear me. But I got there. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect, but I challenged myself, and I was able to do it. And it was interesting because after the show, several people came up to me and said, "You always say that you're not really a singer. And you just did, you just did that whole show and you were great." And and so it was but that was part of the challenge for myself was to really try to see myself with new eyes and push myself to do something really different. And I feel like I succeeded.
And I'm really proud of you.
Oh, hey, thanks. Moving into the performance piece. So for Sight and Sound, did you ever have to do anything in one of the shows that you never expected you would have to do?
I did. So for Noah, basically everybody except the family dies at the end of Act 1. We all drown.
Oh, no.
So then we're not in the rest of the show. So in order to give us something to do, we were assigned various things. So I was assigned, animal handler, props assistant, and set mover. Being an animal handler, I was in charge of a cow. So not just a cow, but a cow with like the big horns. It was me and 2 other females who were my same height. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm 5'3". I'm very petite.
Yeah.
And we had to have training with this cow on how to, maneuver him and keep him from, stabbing us with the horns. We had to walk him to the actors. They would bring the cow on stage. When they brought him off, I would, then take the cow and put it in his pen. So it was kind of frightening at first because we've got this animal that weighs, I don't even know how much, but could take us out in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So funny story, they gave the 3 smallest girls this cow, but they gave one of the biggest guys, meaning like height and muscular, they gave him cats. We asked him, could we trade with you? Because we were really, really scared at first, and he refused to trade with us. It ended up working out well in the end because we bonded with Junior. Junior is the cow's name.
Aww.
We loved him. We took pictures with him. So we ended up loving him. But I thought, what an odd choice to give us this cow and this guy who's like 6 foot something, kitty cat.
He was like a cat scratch bowl.
I don't know. But it was kind of weird that we had to do this stuff, but I'm also really glad. So even during the blackouts, they literally built the inside of Noah's Ark on this massive stage.
Wow.
And so during the blackouts, I would run up these spirals, these hidden doors that were in the Ark, and we would run up and grab the different props and run back down and move these incredibly huge, 2-3 story set pieces. So I'm really thankful for that opportunity that I got a chance to do that. And instead of just sitting backstage doing nothing. One other funny animal story during Miracle of Christmas, like Simmon and I mentioned, there's lots of live animals. There's a lot of sheep and goats and different things like that. And there would be fog on the stage during like the angel scenes, and we would have to kneel. Well, most days we would kneel in a pile of sheep poop or horse poop. And you would kneel and you would instantly know. So that was the joy of working with
the Miracle of Christmas.
The Miracle of Christmas and farm animals. So yeah, Sight and Sound has their own barn out back, and they have camels and pretty much any kind of animal you can have.
Yeah.
They had and used in all their shows, which I felt like it brought just this realness and this nice touch to the show. But it also had its challenges, like when they would be bringing a camel down one of the hallways, you couldn't walk by it because they can kick to the side and knock you out. So you had to go through training on how to interact with all the animals.
How did not get kicked by a camel.
Yes. So that was really fun.
So what did you learn about yourself during the course of the show?
Lots. No, okay. One thing I learned is that I do not love doing things on repeat hundreds of times. As I mentioned at the beginning, we did 13 shows a week. To put that into perspective, Broadway does about 8. We did 13. Some days we had 3 shows back to back. I don't know that I could do that for years on end, doing the exact same show over and over and over and over. It made me wonder. I've never had this like strong drive to be on Broadway, but if I did, that would have knocked it out right then and there. Like, nope, can't do it. I admire people who can do the same role and have the same energy for thousands of performances. So that is something I definitely learned. I also learned I love being an ensemble member. You can have a lot more fun sometimes. I know for us, because we didn't have any lines in certain scenes, we would come up with different characters for each show to make it fresh. Like the audience had no idea. Like we weren't saying things to distract or doing things to distract from what was really going on, but it gave us something to do and to look forward to, and, kind of stretched us as actors while we were milling about in the background.
Yes, yeah, no, that'll do it. So for proof, what did you learn about yourself in that experience?
Yeah. I love small casts.
True. They are good.
4 people was amazing. And being on stage with a small amount of people, you get to have these strong one-on-one moments, these long, real conversations, not just you walk on, you say a line or two, and you skip off. Like, you get to have these real, genuine conversations that you would have in real life. It's not that I don't like a big cast. I just prefer smaller casts. And being an introvert, I didn't get as exhausted after rehearsals or performances. I mean, mind you, doing a drama, like, I was exhausted in that way after doing a performance, but being around them, I was never like, oh, I can't wait to get away. Like, I honestly wanted to spend more time with them. It just felt like a family instead of, you know, just connecting with a handful of people and the rest you don't really get to know. We all, cast and crew, knew each other really, really well.
That is really nice. It's cool when you can bond like that and really know everyone really well.
Oh, absolutely.
So what was the most stressful part?
For proof, we had to perform at Mitchell Community College because Theater Statesville doesn't have a theater space yet. And we performed at their Rotary Auditorium, which is a space where a professor teaches students. So we were literally inches away from the audience. I could put my hand out and touch people. So being able to hear everything they say, the noises that they made, the candy wrappers, their phones, all of that was just beyond distracting for me. And I never look out into the audience. I don't ever want to break that, you know, fourth wall unless it's required. But out of the corner of my eye, even with the stage lights on us, it illuminated some of the audience members so I could see them out of the corner of my eye. And for someone with attention issues, it makes it very challenging. So for me, that was the most stressful part. Like, nothing about being in the show, nothing about the cast members, none of that was stressful. It was the audience being so darn close.
Being right there.
Yeah, I did not like that.
It was a very different space. It was it's not your usual.
Oh my gosh, like, when we first saw the space, originally there were seats even closer that we took out, where our, like, knees would have touched their knees at some points. And I was like, no, we cannot do this. I swear I will never remember any of my lines if I'm sitting in their lap.
Oh my
so
gosh.
I'm glad we at least had an extra, you know, couple of inches away. But, it really, like, not having a theater space is very challenging, but it also forces you to learn to adapt and to make it work no matter what the space is. So as hard as it is, it's very, I don't know, I think it's good too.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, Simmon, so for You're in Town, what was the most stressful part about being in the show?
I would say it was a combination of costume changes. I was a bunch of different random people, as well as Little Becky Two Shoes. And so I had several different costumes, and you were on, again, I was on stage pretty much all of the time. And so there wasn't a lot of, like, time to do these costume changes, etc. And it was we had a lot of props too. So there was, like, you know, maintaining all of your props, and the space that Genesius is in is a very old building, and it wasn't really made to be a theater. It got modified into a theater space. So where you can keep things is kind of weird, and you know, trying to find, like, random corners to store stuff. And so I would say that was pretty stressful, just making sure you were dressed and on the stage.
Oh my gosh. Well, and I think, you know, people who come to see a show, you know, I hope they realize, you know, obviously learning the lines is tricky and remembering your blocking, but what you don't see is all the other stuff you have to remember backstage. There's a lot to remember. Like, if you forget to grab a prop or your costume doesn't get changed in time, you have to figure it out.
Well, and this was before I ventured into the land of wigs, which I now love. I love a wig, and I will never say no to a wig if you want to give me one. But my hair, it has one mode. And so if it's whatever mode it's in, that's how it has to stay. I can't do something to it and then try to undo that thing, or, you know, whatever. So that was another challenge, was like trying to figure out how to like change my hair a couple of times for different moments so I didn't look as much like Little Becky Two Shoes. It was like this whole thing. So that was pretty stressful. Also, it's a very wordy show. If you listen to it, and you don't even think about it so much when you listen to it, because I listened to it a bunch before we started, but words, and hard words to articulate, especially as an ensemble member. And just, I mean, again, I didn't have a ton of lines, but we sang in like all of the songs. And so just remembering all of the words and where they came in and how to use your diction to make them stick out, because you want the audience to hear all of the words because they're very funny and they're very good.
Well,
so,
yeah, if the audience can't understand what you're saying.
Yeah. So
yeah.
That was stressful, but we figured it out. I mean, most of the time, by the time we get to performance, I'm very relaxed because I've had a lot of rehearsal and I feel prepared. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't so much that it was as stressful during the performance period, but it was something that was always on our minds of like, gotta get these words right.
Have to do it. So what was your favorite part of these performances?
It was just so fun, beginning to end. It was just because it's a funny show and the audience like ate it up with a spoon every night, even people who had no idea what to expect. And it was just joyful. It was exactly what you want when you're a performer and you go out there and people just are like, yay, we love it. And so that was so awesome. And I just loved it. I think my favorite part of the show was there's this moment in the second act where I'm wearing this leg brace, and the main character, Bobby Strong, he removes the leg brace like he's going to make me walk fine without the leg brace and have this miracle, Christ-like moment. And I fall. Like that's the joke is
okay,
they takes the brace off and I try to take a step and I fall. And I had not done a ton of physical comedy until this show. So it gave me a chance to really flex my physical comedy, and the audience just died every night and really loved it. And I even had someone come up to me and said, sometimes when I'm feeling down, I just think about when that brace comes off your leg and you fall over. And it's like, and so that was probably my favorite moment in the whole performance process.
It always makes a difference when the audience has an audible, either a laugh or if it's something sad and you hear the, oh no, or you just hear these moments and you're like, okay, it was worth it. Yes, we did what we were supposed to do.
Yeah.
So for Sideshow, was there a disaster of any kind that the audience didn't know about?
So there was a couple, actually.
Oh, no.
Not that many. Maybe 3. But one in particular that sticks out for my part. So we had these stairs. There was like this, with the set, it was a very simple set, but there was this debate over these stairs and if they were going to happen, if they were not going to happen. So they finally happened. And the stairs were built very well, but it's a very small stage. So there were pretty steep stairs, and they had to get locked into this high platform before the show. And then Dara and I had to walk down it didn't have a railing, and we had to walk down the stairs conjoined at the hip, which is hard and it's very steep and there's nothing to hold on to. So we had to work it out in rehearsal so that like Joey and Brandon, who was the other guy who was Violet's love interest, they were holding our hands as we came down to kind of help us and make it a little bit easier, and that helped. But so one night we get up to the top of this platform and we try to start walking down the stairs and it's not locked, and we can feel that the stairs aren't locked. And as we're stepping down and also singing,
of course
as we're stepping down singing, we feel it lock into place. Like we almost
oh my gosh
bit it. Like it was bad, and the audience didn't know we covered it, and it was fine, but it was terrifying because we were like, we don't want to die on this stage.
No, not the time, not the place.
No. So that was pretty interesting.
What did you learn about yourself during the performance process?
I learned that I really loved singing in a way that I didn't realize. And although singing always makes me anxious on some level, that I was really capable of singing challenging material and singing it really well, and also conveying the emotion and doing all the things that I had dreamed that I might be able to do, and that dream got to come through and come true in that process. So I was really thankful for that, and it was a beautiful moment.
Aww.
So looking back on these experiences, did you feel like it was hard to say goodbye? Was it hard to move on from these experiences in your life?
Well, for Sight and Sound, I had been offered another full year contract for a brand new show. They had never done it before, and I even got a role that had like a singing solo. So it was like a big deal, and I turned it down to go back to college. I felt like it was a very mature decision at the time, but I was leaving Lauren. We had just recently, I don't want to say, because we were best friends and we spent so much time together, we got to a point where we knew like we wanted to get married. So it wasn't like we had just started dating and it was this new thing. Like we knew the next step we wanted to take was getting engaged and getting married. So saying goodbye to him and not knowing if I would see him again or when was horrible. But I did want to finish school, and I wanted to take that next step for myself just to get finalize my education. So it was difficult, but I knew I was making the right decision at that time.
Yeah.
And for Proof, it was difficult moving on because I had grown so close to everybody, and we had gotten together so often that it just felt normal. And unfortunately, right when Proof ended, we had planned this pie night on pie,
Yeah, on 314.
Yes. So everyone brought pie, and we had this great event, and then that was the last get together I've ever had because of COVID. So it was like this group of people, they were the last group gathering I've had for the last, 6 months?
Last Supper.
The Last Supper. And I miss them. So it was difficult, but I'm sure once we're back to being able to get together again, we will have more hangout time because we all like genuinely enjoyed each other's company.
That's awesome.
What about you? Was it difficult moving on?
It was. I would say with Urinetown, it was hard putting it behind us and moving on. But I think, I've been doing theater my whole life, and you get used to, on some level, although you're sad when it's over, you get used to the idea that like this experience lives on its own, and it's a once and done type of thing, and it'll never occur again, and that's kind of the beauty of it. And I had then near the tail end of that experience decided to go back to New York and try to make that work and do that for myself. And so there was a lot of things to look forward to and things on the horizon. So it gave me the confidence to look ahead. And so as sad as it was to leave it behind, it gave me so much and lifted me up so much. With Sideshow, I felt like I had done what I needed to do, and it was a very satisfying experience, and it was over, but it felt good that it was over. It felt good that it was an achievement, that it had happened, and it happened well. And sadly, I don't think enough people came to see it. It was a lesser attended show that season, but even with that, it was so spectacular for me, but I felt so accomplished by it that it was almost nice to put it to bed and say, I did it. It happened. It's not I hope it happens. It occurred. And so I was also driving about an hour and 15 minutes from where I was living at the time to go to rehearsals and performances. So it was nice to not have to do that.
That's a lot, especially at the end of a show, which gets done at 10, 10:30, 11 at night, depending on how long it is. You just want to get home and go to bed.
Yes, you sure do. So as we wrap things up, if you could go back and relive either of these experiences, do you think you would do that? And if you did, would you do anything differently?
So shows in general, like I mentioned, I don't like doing things on repeat. And I'm fine usually walking away from a show, like the actual performance part. What's hard for me is leaving the people and that part of it. So for Sight and Sound, I probably wouldn't want to go back and redo the actual show. But that year there was the time my husband was trying to get my attention and trying to show me how much he liked me. And he did all these incredible things. And I stupidly did not write any of them down. So I've lost a lot of my specific memories. So if I could go back and just take notes and write myself a little book so I could look back and remember that time regarding us, I would do it, but not for the performance.
I
don't know
get
if
that.
That makes sense.
No, it totally does.
For proof, I think I would go back. I mean, it was, a few months ago, but I would definitely do that show another time. Again, always for me, focuses on the people, but that performance, I just really enjoy that show. I love it with all my heart. And like I mentioned earlier on in the podcast, I'm getting older, so I won't be able to ever really do it again. And it's not like there's an ensemble part I could play or there's this and I could potentially experience the show again. So I would definitely go back and relive that experience, hands down. I miss them.
Yeah. When you go back, could you also erase COVID?
Yes,
Okay.
I will do my best to work on that.
Thank you. Hop in the DeLorean, erase COVID,
Yeah.
relive the experience, come back. I love it.
I'm on it.
Okay. And so if you had to pick one moment from each experience that kind of sums up what the production meant to you and how it will sort of live on in your memory, is there a moment you can pin down for each experience?
I don't know that there's anything different from stuff I've already mentioned. But for Sight and Sound, to show me that I can do things, I can do hard things that I don't think I'm good enough for, like going to that audition, I didn't know I was going to get in. And just being on that stage in front of thousands of people every performance, and that wonderful feeling of being in front of a live audience, I will take away from that. And of course, the relationships I made during that show. And for proof, just what hard work and dedication and professionalism and camaraderie does for a show when everyone's on the same page. That for me will always stand out. Like, it made the experience what it was.
Yeah, totally. I agree. I think for me, if I could go back, I'm not really a big if I could go back person.
Yeah, kind of same.
Yeah, I tend to feel like everything leads you in a certain direction, and good and bad, and you kind of just need to accept what it was.
Yeah, because if you play that what if game, well, what if or let me re-experience it, just messes with your head.
I think the only part that I would say that I say this a lot, and I'm noticing it more doing this podcast, and it's a good thing that I'm noticing it, because then it maybe will remind me to be better about it. But I think I doubt myself a lot.
Oh.
And I think, if anything, going back in these experiences, I wish that I gave myself more credit for being,
Talented.
capable of doing what was in front of me. And on some level, if I didn't have the confidence, I wouldn't have even tried. But I think I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I get really in my head. And so I don't always enjoy it when I'm doing it. And I will say, in Sideshow, I did try to make a concerted effort to enjoy the moment when I was in it. I remember doing that, partially because I was a little older and I could give myself that distance in my mind to be like, okay, I need to be enjoying this. But probably that's the only thing, if I could go back, that I would be like, hey, girl, it's cool. Be nice to yourself.
Well, I think that's a good lesson for all of us. I know some people come across in theater, like when you meet them, that they're super confident and they have no issues with themselves. But I think deep down, most of us are pretty insecure and hard on ourselves, and we could all love each other a little bit more.
A little bit more. I also think picking one moment from each show, I would say with Urinetown, there was that moment with the leg brace, with the pratfall. And that was probably the moment that, I know it sounds funny to say that summed up the experience.
No,
but
it
was this euphoric, fun, exciting moment in which it felt like all of the right things kind of intersected to make this experience. And it was a standout moment for me that I will always cherish and love. And I would also say then for Sideshow, there's a song at the end of the first act called Who Will Love Me As I Am. And it's a song that I had heard once or twice before we did the show, but I really fell in love with it doing the show and was surprised that I hadn't liked it more before. And the whole song is just about exactly that. You know, I am this person, and who will accept me for exactly who I am and love me and want to give me the things that I want. And at that point in my life, that was a very important piece for me, loving myself and finding that love that I really wanted to find from someone else. I had gone through a divorce, and that was very hard, and it was a very challenging relationship, and wanting to really find the right partner. And little did I know the right partner was on stage with me that whole time. And now looking back, having Joey in my life and having someone who does truly love me for who I am and truly embodies what that song is yearning for. So I will never forget standing on that stage with Dara, us belting out that song and really feeling that song from our guts, and then it coming true in my own life. So I think that's how I would sum it up. We want to thank you guys. This was a really cool one.
Thank you for listening. And this was fun talking about these experiences, because Simmon and I have not talked about these before right now with each other.
Nope. This was all new. And we'd really love to hear about some of your favorite stage experiences.
Yes.
If there are some favorite stage experiences that you have that you want to share with us, comment on our social media, leave comments on this podcast. You can email us at downstagerightpodcast@gmail.com, and, you know, just share your experience, or if you'd be okay with us sharing it with our listeners, we'd love to do that. So definitely tell us what your favorite stage experiences are all about and what this episode made you think about. Our next episode is going to be airing on Monday, September 21st, and that is called Boundaries on Our Passions. And we're going to talk about the tough decisions that sometimes we have to make, including around activities like theater, which we love the most. Sometimes we have to set guidelines for ourselves, and that can be really hard, especially when we love something as much as we love theater. Also, remember to subscribe and follow us and the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. You can also find our episodes on our website, so take a look there. And a reminder to follow us on social media. That's really the best place to keep up with all we have going on. So on Instagram, we're at Downstage Right, and on Facebook, we're at Downstage Right Podcast. And thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.